the discussion and give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So in the Q&A, we can explore this idea of nudging. The authors in this book sort of labeled their approach libertarian paternalism, which is kind of an oxymoron. Those terms typically do not go well together. But their thinking goes as follows. It is libertarian because no freedoms are taken away from the individuals, and it is paternalistic in the sense that we're trying to guide people into making better decisions. Let me give you about 2 or 3 examples, and then I'll sort of apply that to the Cuban environment. Let us decide that, for example, as a society, we conclude that we want our children to eat healthier foods. And then in the cafeteria line in middle school, for example, we decide that we're going to place healthy food items, fruits and the apples and the bananas or what have you, very prominently early in the cafeteria line, nicely displayed, very enticingly. And the candy bars, we're going to place it at the back, a little bit less accessible so they cannot reach it. That would be a way of nudging. That would be an approach that does not take away any liberties. The candy bars are still in the line, but we're sort of redirecting the students to hopefully pick up the apples and so on and so forth. Give you a couple more examples. One rather serious and one, I think, somewhat funny. The serious goes something like this. We do know that organ donations, in the case of an automobile accident or some untimely death, save lives. We know that this is something that is desirable at that point. We also know that in the United States we have a very, very long line of people waiting for organ donations. And we also know that many of us, in informal conversations, and I include myself in this bracket, will sometimes express that, you know, I would like to be an organ donor. Should something happen to me in an automobile accident, I would like to be an organ donor. And yet, we do not take the necessary steps to inscribe ourselves as organ donors. In the United States, the law is that you are considered to be not a donor unless you have explicitly registered yourself as such, and your driver's license shows that you're an organ donor. Well, interestingly enough, a number of European countries have changed the default. And they have set a default that you are presumed to be an organ donor, unless you have sent an email saying, I don't want to be, and then your driver's license says you're not an organ donor. Simple. A changing of the default. The result, of course, has been like 97, 98% increase in organ donations with the resulting savings of lives. And if you want to do a comparative study, Germany and Austria, which are 2 countries very similarly in culture, have different defaults. And you can see the dramatic changes. That qualifies as this kind of choice architecture, this kind of nudge. Nudging the population simply by changing the default. I'll give you one more example, and then we'll sort of apply it to the Cuba context. It turns out that in an airport in a Scandinavian country, I believe it was Holland, remember them, they were really having a problem in the men's bathroom. Men were just not aiming properly when they were going to the bathroom. They're just not, and they really had a sanitation problem. Well, the Cuban solution, the totalitarian solution, would probably be to place a couple of milicianos, the security guards there, to make sure that we aim properly and that you know, we take care of our business. The people that developed this nudging idea came up with, I thought it was brilliant. They decided to paint a black fly in each one of the urinals. It turns out that we aim at the fly. And I don't know, we want to drown the fly or what, but we aim at the fly. So the problem was resolved. That is a nudge. Okay? And you know, I cite a number of other examples in the book of how to nudge, So I started thinking, okay, can this be used? Can this be used in a post-Castro Cuba? And I think the original part of the book is the thinking from that point on. And let me make a parenthesis why I think this is important. And I was talking to a class today. The model, the intellectual model that describes the relationship between government and those that are government in a democracy is dramatically different from the model that describes the relationship between government and those governed in a totalitarian regime. In a totalitarian regime, people are used to changes coming from the top down. Changes always originate with the leadership and come down. So people wait. Cubans wait. They're waiting for Raul Castro to do something. They wait. That is the relationship model. In a democracy, at least in theory, the relationship model is the other way. Changes ought to originate with the people, and then we tell those that govern us what it is that we want. So imagine that these people that have lived under this different model for half a century. There are only very elderly people in Cuba today, alive today, that remember what it is to vote, that have participated in any kind of democratic regime, that have enjoyed a free press or anything like that. Knowing that and knowing how society, civil society has deteriorated, so I started thinking, well, how can we use that? And then on the second part of the book, I begin to suggest some possible ways of nudging into better decision making. I'll mention a couple, one on the economic side and one on the political side, and then sort of open it up for some of your questions. On the economic side, for example, I say, well, if we do have a post-Castro regime truly interested in moving the country towards a market economy, would it make sense to dollarize the Cuban economy? Similarly to what Panama did some years ago and more recently Ecuador. Simply getting rid of the national currency and dollarizing the economy. And frankly, I don't care if it's dollars or euros or the rand. I'll tell you why. My thinking is not that this is the ideal macroeconomic technique. If we have any economists in the audience, you would probably argue, no. You would be better off if you have a truly wise, independent central bank, and if you have a wise, independent government, and all of them are very interested in progress and making rational, prudent decisions. But you know what? We're not going to have that. It's not going to happen. So given that I know that that's not going to happen, dollarization, if nothing else, and there's a number of other arguments that I could develop, means that those governing cannot just print money. They cannot inflate the economy. They're going to have to make a budget and live by that budget. When I made a presentation on this a few weeks ago, someone said, well, Joe, that's not a nudge, that's a straitjacket. Well, maybe so. But it will be a way of nudging, if you will, those in government into making better decisions. They have no choice. They don't have any money. They cannot print it if they don't have it. So my argument, again, in that case, is not purely as an economist, but rather finding a way of creating an environment where those in government need to make better decisions. On the political side, I throw out the idea of, what about a parliamentary system? And this is kind of an interesting subject. All of the Latin American governments in our hemisphere, well, with the exception of those, the British colonies, ex-colonies, have adopted presidential systems mimicking the United States presidential system. You look at Latin America and you don't see a parliamentary system like we see in the United Kingdom, for example. Well, we just simply copied the system of the United States, but our system works if and only if you have truly independent branches of government. An independent judiciary, an independent legislative, an independent executive branch. The idea of a truly independent judiciary